Hailing frequencies open and welcome aboard Treks and Tangents. I'm your co-host Brian.
And I'm your co-host Jaci. I'm the Star Trek newbie who treks off on tangents.
And I'm your Star Trek expert who is here to get the tangents back on track. Each episode we watch and talk about a different Star Trek episode. And this week we watched
Star Trek, the original series, Season 1, Episode 19, Tomorrow is Yesterday.
And with that, we are one episode shy of being a third of the way through Season 1 of the original series.
That's super exciting. I never thought I'd even get this far, to be honest.
Yeah. I think we covered it way back 12 episodes ago when we talked about statistically most podcasts stop after 8 episodes. They just fizzle out. So
we're still going.
We're still here.
Energy drinks are our friend.
It's like living Groundhog's Day every day. But thank you all for your continued support and listening into our podcast. We greatly appreciate it. Thank you everyone for liking, sharing, commenting. Don't forget, if you're listening to this episode the day it comes out on the 24th of February, this Friday, the 27th, we have another episode dropping on our Patreon for our crew members of the Animated Detours, where we dive into the animated series for Star Trek. So go check that out.
That should be fun.
But enough with the housekeeping. Let's jump into this week's episode. We'll start with our revisit to last week's Turbolift tease. That's where we gave Jaci the title of this week's episode, and Jaci, without any other information, tried to give her prediction or guess to the plot of this week's episode.
We can skip it this time.
A little foreshadowing for us all. Computer, what was Jaci's prediction last week?
Jaci was excited to give her prediction last week, which was, I think the crew will visit a new planet, but I am going to imagine Dr. McCoy is going to touch something or pick something up, be curious, and that will have a twist on reality where he is going to keep reliving his existence until they figure out how to cure it.
So, Jaci, how do you think you did with your prediction for this week?
Big bomb.
I mean, I think you understood the time travel aspect that the title was cluing itself up to.
I was trying to think outside the box because these titles are weird, but I failed.
But yeah, McCoy has a relatively minor role in this episode, so he's not the central focus point.
But he's my favorite after my girl Jan.
But what did you think about this week's episode? What were your initial thoughts?
I actually really liked it. I was surprised. But I think I liked it more because the music added so much to it, kind of like emotion and intrigue. And because it's basically a very small story, so they had to make it go for a whole hour.
Sure.
But I'm a musician, so I'm always going to pick out the plunger mute trumpet when I look at a pretty girl and stuff.
Right. There's a lot of background melody to punctuate moments of the episode. This is an episode that really closely, in my mind, resembles the tone of Shore Leave.
Yes.
Where there's drama and there's tension, but it's punctuated a lot with internal jokes, comedic side relief bits.
And he even broke the wall. You told me about a wall, but
breaking the fourth wall?
Yeah. Kirk looks at us.
I think he comes close to breaking the fourth wall in a couple points. He doesn't actually do it.
Oh, I thought we were actually making a connection.
So, I like this episode. I think, first and foremost, that any episode that involves time travel, it's my second favorite type of plot to Star Trek. My favorite plot episodes would be the ones that relate to the mirror universe that we'll get to eventually. Time travel is a lot of fun in Star Trek on how they handle it. Plus, when you have this type of an episode with its tone, where they're not taking themselves super seriously, where they have very punctuated comedic relief moments, as long as they're not too overbearing to the overall plot episode, as long as they're just sprinkled in, as I think this episode does a good balance of doing, I think it's a really strong episode.
Agreed.
So, with all that aside, Jackie, why don't you walk us through this week's episode?
Alrighty. The opening of this episode, I believe, is like a real Air Force base. At least it looks real to me.
It definitely looks like they got some B-roll footage of actual jet fighter planes, a military base, and so it does add to that authenticity of what we're looking at. It instantly tells us that we're not going to see a normal episode that we've seen in the past. This is going to be something quite different.
Right, so I was like, well, are we on Earth, or is there like another planet like Earth that we're going to encounter? And then we're taken inside the Air Force base, like at the command station, and the navigator, his name is Webb, he sees like a blip pop onto his screen, and so he yells for his captain and says, "Look what I see." And I don't know where it came from. So the captain has all those fighter jets we were just talking about go back up in the air and see what's up. Like, what is this blip? And we actually get to see, imagine Top Gun, we see that, but from 1960, as we learn.
Yes, instead of the danger zone, we get the tribble zone.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah, we'll have to write the song for it.
Tribble zone.
Okay, we won't sing it, we'll just write it.
So we have Captain Christopher going out to figure out what this is, and he's on it.
He's launched his jet and he's flown up to try to intercept whatever this blip is.
Yes, because right now they think they're seeing a real life UFO, and then, ooh, opening credit.
Right. We get a great shot, I think, of the Enterprise as seen flying through the Earth sky.
It's really cool.
Yeah. Then we get the opening credits. And since we're 19 episodes in and Jackie swears that she watches the opening credits every time for the music,
Yes.
can you recite the monologue that Captain Kirk gives at the opening credits?
He says that they're on a 5-year voyage.
No. Word for word. Quote it.
Oh, I don't know. It just talks about we're on a 5-year mission that to look out for all the, I don't know. He's just searching for things for 5 years.
Searching for things for 5 years. The space travels version of Gilligan's Island in the 3-hour tour.
But 5 years, but yet it's like we have 1,000,000 light years. So I think they just like to pick numbers out of the world. So it's like, boom.
Well, light year would be a measurement of distance. 5 years would be a measurement of actual time.
Then they need to stop using the word years. It's like dear and dear, they and their. Yeah, we need to have a chat.
We need to have a chat with, I don't even know who we would at this point, Einstein, who named all those measurements, physicists, scientists.
Spock.
We will sit down with Leonard Nimoy. Not really.
That'd be really fun, though.
But we get our opening credits and we come back from our commercial break.
Yes. And for some reason, they are all picking themselves up from the ground on the bridge because they've been like rustled around.
We get that explanation in the captain's log as we come back from the opening credits. Kirk fills it in that the Enterprise, when on a routine resupply mission, which would be coming back out from the depths of space back toward Earth and colonized space, they got caught up in what I believe Kirk says is a dark matter star, gets caught up in the gravitational pull of that space phenomena, and they threw the Enterprise into full reverse, put all their power into reversing the engines to not get pulled into it. They broke free, but very much like the effect of a rubber band snapping, the Enterprise snapped backwards and accelerated very, very fast, or accelerated away from the star very, very fast. And that is all they know at this point, that they are just recovering from the sudden acceleration.
Which made them fall out of their seats.
Yeah, everyone's a bit bumped up.
I mean, this cast is really good at, acting like they've been in like an earthquake. They're really good at that. But we find out that everything is okay except those warp engines. They need some work. But Scotty's on top of it. The Enterprise is now in its own orbit around the Earth. Kirk asks for the viewing screen to be turned on, and he can see Earth like as if we would through a normal airplane, all that open land and beauty.
Right. They're seeing what this obviously clues everyone to the fact that they are way too low. Besides the fact that they're visible to jet planes, as we'll find out in a moment, they're probably partially visible from the ground. So they have to obtain a higher orbit, not only to achieve a stable orbit, but also so that they're not quite as visible to everyone on Earth.
And also during this time, Uhura is trying to contact Starfleet to report what has happened, but she's unable to connect. On the other hand, though, she is receiving a message.
She's picking up a different transmission signal.
So we decided to listen to that one, and it's like we're listening to a morning news report from Earth itself.
Specifically, a news report of the upcoming first manned mission or first moon mission from humankind to the moon, which everyone on the Enterprise surmises puts them in, according to them, ancient Earth history of the 1960s, which would be modern time for when this aired.
They're in a time warp. So now we get to do the dance.
No, we're not doing the dance. For the one fan that keeps track, this is our one reference to Rocky Horror for the episode.
And then we also hear air transmissions that Spock verifies is coming from underneath cloud cover, like from an airplane. And it's actually a fighter jet. That's where we meet Captain Christopher, who is his call name is Blue J4, and ground control is called Blackjack, just so you know when they're doing their call signs.
I think Top Gun had cooler call signs.
Yes, Goose, Maverick, So they believe this is a UFO, and it needs to come down.
They being the Air Force.
Yes, and it needs to come down because, hello, the people of Earth are going to freak out. And Kirk is telling Sulu, gain altitude, we got to get out of here. But again, Enterprise, she's sluggish. She's not going anywhere. And the men on the ground, the Blackjack, they keep encouraging Blue Jay to get closer and closer so that he's able to tell them what he's seeing. And then he's also told that 2 more jets are on their way to assist him, but it'll be 2 minutes for him to wait. And our Captain Christopher says it's going to be way too late. That UFO is moving fast. On the Enterprise, the crew can hear that the humans on Earth are trying to bring the Enterprise down because Spock has figured out that this aircraft is heavily armed, and he calls it an interceptor with missiles. So he doesn't know what exactly it can do to the Enterprise.
I assume Spock is getting all of this technical data from the ship's computer, but he's also concerned, based on that information he's getting, that the jet fighter could be armed with nuclear weapons. I think Spock is concerned the Enterprise still has some of its systems down from the jolts and the time travel, and it's still bringing its systems back online. They don't have a lot of ability for evasive maneuvers to dodge missiles at this point. They certainly don't have traditional defense mechanisms against missiles. A giant ship that's supposed to operate in space, not in the atmosphere of a planet. So Spock is concerned that this one little jet fighter can do some pretty significant damage to the Enterprise that they won't be able to fix in a timely manner.
Kirk asks Scotty to activate the tractor beam onto the jet to hold it in place so the Enterprise can finish its escape. Spock doesn't think that the jet will be able to withstand the tractor beam's intensity. It could begin to break apart. The jet, in fact, does start to break apart, and Kirk has to make the decision to beam the pilot aboard the Enterprise in order to save his life.
And just want to point out, as Kirk makes the order and the pilot is beamed out of his jet onto the Enterprise, everyone gets beamed in the position in which they are when that tractor beam initializes. So if you're laying down, you get beamed on board laying down. If you're running, you are beamed mid-stride in that run. So technically, the pilot, when he's beamed on board, should be in a somewhat sitting position like he would be in the jet. So when he fully materializes on the Enterprise in the transporter room, he would still be in the sitting position but no longer have a chair to sit in, so he would fall on his butt, which would have been pretty comical. I think that would have fit the episode quite well. Instead, he beams on board fully standing upright, and he is facing the back wall, so we do get to have him turn around to take in the entire transporter room. I think it's a missed opportunity for a comedic moment.
Well, that explains my question later on in the episode.
We'll see that coming up here.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. So, as you just said, he is beamed onto the Enterprise and he has his helmet, everything on, and Kirk welcomes him down in the transporter room. And the pilot is super dazed and confused. All he does is say his name and he started rattling off serial numbers.
Yeah, but important to point out, he's not scared. He's not fearful. He's just confused, was a good way to put it. And cautious. Definitely also very cautious to his surroundings, which makes sense.
Well, I mean, yeah, like he's kind of like he was captured, so he doesn't want to seem weak or, he doesn't know what happened.
Yeah.
And when he turns around, he notices everybody looking at him is a human. And when Kirk says, hi, wow, you speak English. So, I think he kind of relaxes a little bit. And so we know that his name now is Captain John Christopher. And Kirk keeps telling him to relax. He's okay. Come on down off the platform. You're among friends. I thought that helped him calm down also. Like, you're okay.
Yeah, Kirk is very much in a soothing force, and I think how Captain Kirk handles himself in these first few minutes definitely keep Captain John, from panicking too much. But Kirk is also very cautious into the information that he gives out. Captain John wants a lot of answers. He wants them immediately. Kirk very much is soothing and reassuring, but deflective, and specifically says, we will tell you what we choose to tell you when we choose to tell you. Kirk also apologizes for destroying the jet.
So Kirk has Captain Christopher or we call him Captain John?
Whatever you want to call him. Spaceman.
Well, let's have Spaceman follow him, through the hall. Come with me to the bridge. Let's just give you like a small tour. And as they're going through the hallway, a young woman walks by and says, hello. And there's that music change with that trumpet.
It's like
whoa, whoa.
Yeah, it's... How was it like, Jaci?
Whoa, whoa.
Okay.
That's a cupped trumpet. It's a pretty lady.
You can play music, but you can't imitate it. I will describe it as... My notes have it as burlesque jazz.
Okay.
You don't agree.
But you get the point. Like, he's not used to seeing women in a working role.
Yeah, so the woman in question is a crew member. She is in full uniform. We'll point that out. But
and he does say she's a crew member. She's not just a lady.
Correct. But Captain John's first response was literally, and I quote, a woman?
Like he's never seen one before.
So, for perspective, he's a fighter pilot that has seen with his own eyes a UFO. He's been transported onto this UFO, greeted by people he has no idea who they are, surrounded by technology that is fascinating and beyond his comprehension. And this is the moment that he actually shows the most amount of surprise, shock, emotion, is in reaction to seeing a woman.
Awkward. So they continue down the hallway and they walk onto the turbo lift so that they can go to the bridge. And as they're chatting about the Enterprise, we learn that there are only 12 ships like this.
Yeah, there's later on in Star Trek history, through interviews and books, it's been documented that there are 14 ships that are quote unquote like the Enterprise. I, in my headcanon, some people like to explain off the comment from Kirk as he's trying to throw off Captain John because he doesn't fully trust Captain John. I think if you pull the technical manuals and look at the specific 14 ships that are referenced, 2 of them are not quite in the same caliber and class as the Enterprise. So I think Kirk's number is accurate, but that's my own personal belief. That's my own headcanon. That's part of why I like to be a Star Trek fan, is to invent these reasons and facts to tie everything together through the inconsistencies. But it is of note we had the entire walk through the hallway and we have this entire conversation in the turbo lift. But when earlier Kirk ordered Captain John transported or beamed aboard the Enterprise, he makes the order from the bridge and then immediately comes down, and the next scene that we get is instantaneous walking into the transporter room as Captain John is materializing. It's an example of, where did the extra time go? What shortcut did Kirk find to get down to the transporter room that they decided not to take to get back to the bridge?
There's a slide.
There's a slide.
Yeah, like a playground. You never know when you need it.
I'm having less trouble imagining a giant red plastic slide in the inside of the Enterprise to get from deck to deck. And I'm a little disturbed at how easy it is for me to picture that.
Like chutes and ladders. That'd be fun.
Anyway.
Okay, sorry. They're on the lift. And Captain Christopher John, he's like trying to get more information, thinking that, oh, so you're part of the Navy and you're just secret. But he's like, no, we are United Earth Space Probe Agency.
Right. This is, again, one of the names that is tossed out. We are still at the point in the Star Trek episodes where Starfleet is not a common name, but for all intents purposes, this is Starfleet.
Got it. And again, he basically says it's difficult to explain, but we're from the future. Da-da-da. As they're walking off of the lift onto the bridge, Captain John mentions that, he doesn't believe in little green men. And in front of him is Spock and Uhura, and Spock says, I agree.
And we get a moment where Captain John is reacting to seeing Spock. If it's not super obvious from the camera cuts, he's noticing Spock's pointy ears to identify him as an alien. So we're getting this reaction. This is the first alien that Captain John has seen. Again, would like to point out, not as surprised as when he saw a woman crew member 30 seconds ago.
Exactly. But Kirk says, go ahead and look around. Just don't touch anything. You might find stuff interesting. And he replies, interesting and a half would be a better word. And then Spock does report, though, that they finally achieved an orbit outside of the Earth's atmosphere, so they shouldn't be confused as a UFO by anybody else. Spock takes Kirk aside and tells him we can't let him go back to Earth. I mean, he knows too much. The information that he has could, in fact, affect the future and what we're doing.
It's very much Back to the Future. It's the crux of every time travel episode that we're going to see. Someone from the future goes back in time, negatively impacts or makes a change to the past, which ripples forward into the future. Now the future changes, which means their present is messed up. Follow along or watch 50 Marvel movies recently.
And reluctantly, Kirk agrees. But he tells Spock to take Captain John to go get something more comfortable with the quartermaster because that flight suit looks super uncomfortable. And then come back to my quarters and we'll chat some more. So we're in the quarters, and Captain John is wearing that gold outfit, like, so because he's also a captain.
Yes, so Spock and Captain John enter Kirk's quarters, and Spock has given Captain John a command yellow Starfleet uniform to wear, including the Delta insignia. Let's talk about that for a second. It's an interesting choice, and I don't know if it's just the fact that the costume department didn't have anything else to put him in. I doubt it. So, why would Spock choose to give him a uniform that he hasn't earned, especially because we're about to have a conversation about how ineffective he would integrate into their society if the Enterprise can make it back to the future, Captain John's future, and not put him in some kind of non-service civilian clothing.
Yeah, like even the FBI has like a hoodie and stuff.
So, was it a sign of respect because he is a military person? Off camera, when Spock is giving him the uniform, does he tell him this is kind of the equivalent of the uniform you would wear if you were a crew member, if we have to take you into the future and you decide you want to try to be a part of Starfleet? We're giving this to you as a way to keep you calm, to keep you distracted, to absorb the blow of the news they're about to deliver him that you're not going to go home. Not really sure. It's an interesting choice.
Well, another interesting thing we learned, though, is that when Kirk turns on his computer to record, it has a lovely, sultry lady voice and calls him dear at the end of everything.
It is still Majel Barrett giving the recording, but you're right. It is no longer the flat, emotionless computer voice. It is very much a, sultry is a good way to put it, flirty.
Yeah, she's like, computed, dear.
Yeah, the computer keeps calling Kirk dear.
Even when he tells it to stop talking to me like that. Okay. But I guess they got the computers updated or something on Signet 14, and that planet happens to be ruled by women. So they thought they'd upgrade her voice too, I guess.
Well, the way they word it is they decided, since it's a woman-dominated society on that outpost that serviced the computer, they decided to give the computer a woman's personality, which means a woman's personality is just sultry and flirty. It's a weird thing to add to the episode. It doesn't really add anything to the overall plot.
My thought too, because it was Spock that made that "it even giggles" comment. It was really weird.
It is kind of weird. It does give a bit of comic relief, so we'll assume that that's what purpose it serves, but it doesn't do anything else.
Oh, maybe also because it takes 3 weeks for it to be able to get removed, so maybe that's why they wanted to throw that in there to just look at all this time we have. I don't know. Captain John jokes that they have interesting problems. Then Kirk gets down to business, saying, "You cannot go back to Earth. You know too much. And if you do go, you have a chance of changing all of the future of what will happen. And so by not going back, everything will just be kosher." And Captain John fights back, like, "What about my family? They'll miss me." And then Spock comes back with, "Well, I did some calculations and your name doesn't pop up about anything significant. So it'll just be a little while they miss you."
But the paradox of time travel, if John was to make a significant contribution to history originally and he's been removed, that significant contribution would not appear in the Enterprise's databanks. So, does he make a significant contribution and the Enterprise and Kirk and Spock are existing in an alternate timeline to begin with? Or is this always supposed to happen? Maybe he was supposed to make a contribution that would negatively affect the timeline. And so the correct thing to do is he was supposed to be pulled out of time. Lots of time paradoxes when it comes to these time travel episodes.
This is like a build your own mystery book.
Jackie's referring to the Choose Your Own Adventure.
Yes, that's what yes, choose your own adventure.
No, I think we're going to write a Build Your Own Adventure sci-fi book series that's a knockoff to this.
So we take a commercial break, and then we come back where Spock contacts Kirk in his quarters saying he has new information regarding Captain John, and if they can all go back to the conference room. So Kirk tries to contact Captain John and no reply. He's not answering. Then Kirk has security try to find him. He is probably trying to escape. We pop into the hallway and see that, yes, Captain John is trying to escape. He ambushes the security officer and takes his phaser, then goes into the transport room to try to have that crew member transport him back to Earth. But Kirk knocks him out before he has a chance to do anything, and then we end up in sickbay. Captain John is in a nice hospital bed. McCoy confirms that he's quite healthy, except for some bruises. And then McCoy takes Kirk aside and asks, what are your plans with him? If he can't go back to Earth, he can't just stay here. Is he going to relearn a trade? Can he learn to forget his family? That seems crazy.
Kirk seems to pin a lot of hope on this idea that it's not so bad if we take him with us back to the future. Like you said, retrain him. But McCoy, I think, brings up the point, and Kirk is on board with it, that it's a lot to ask the guy to suddenly pick up and move 300 years into the future, roughly, and retrain yourself, learn a new trade, integrate yourself into society. So, again, Kirk doesn't really have a good plan as to what to do.
But then Spock comes in and he actually admits that he made an error in his calculations. And McCoy is like, yes, a historical moment, because they snark back and forth. In his search on Captain John Christopher, there may not have been much happening, but we learn that he's going to have a son who is going to be Colonel Sean Jeffrey Christopher, and he will be the first successful Earth to Saturn probe mission. It's going to be huge.
It's very important for the development of space travel for humans and Earth, which is the precursor to what Starfleet becomes.
Oh, that's grander than huge.
So now Spock is changing his tune to say, we have to send him back to Earth. If his son is never born, that could drastically change history, so we don't have a choice. And Kirk almost seems pretty relieved in this moment. He agrees that John has to go back and seems to breathe a little easier because the choice really has been taken away from Kirk. Kirk no longer gets to make the decision. The decision has been made for him.
Cutting to the briefing room, Captain Christopher, Spock, and Kirk are discussing how they're going to get him back to Earth, as well as removing all the evidence that the Enterprise was ever in the area. We also learn that Captain John Christopher's plane had cameras that took pictures, and his radio recorded all of the chatter back and forth. So that needs to be removed also.
Right. This becomes the biggest problem and the biggest hurdle to get Captain John back onto Earth and seamlessly reintegrated back into normal life. John can talk about what he saw, but they're counting on, with there being no physical evidence, he'll just be dismissed as another pilot, another person with a UFO story that no one really looks too deeply into, so long as they can get rid of these recordings and these photographs.
So he drafts a map of where Kirk and ends up being Sulu can go to be able to get all that evidence and bring it back to the Enterprise.
Right, because originally Captain John wants to go on the away team to help out, but his request is denied, Spock and Kirk point out that they can't risk him getting hurt or killed, and they have to keep him out of harm's way, because if he dies, he can't father this important son, and everything's for naught.
And now we jump to the Air Force Base where we're inside the building, and Kirk and Sulu are looking for this room where all the evidence is held. And they find a giant primitive computer, and they're just like in awe. I thought that was funny.
Yeah, although I don't know how much in awe they would be. They literally refer to their own computer database as tapes. So they talk about it being an antique and they've seen it in the museum. But again, it's 1967 and the writers are struggling to come up with futuristic technology to distinguish the Enterprise's technology from this ancient computer.
And then we get a view from the Enterprise, McCoy, Spock, and then like a extra crewman in the
Transporter room operator, transporter chief at this point in Star Trek.
Yeah, he has like a robe or something on. A different outfit that doesn't match anything.
Definitely an engineer's type uniform from this time period.
And they're just waiting for them to return, like in and out.
Well, it's a comedic moment because McCoy makes a comment that it's taking too long. Spock replies that they're being stealthy, and stealth generally requires more time. And so it's a fun interaction to further develop the relationship between McCoy and Spock and their contrasting personalities.
They're fun and friendly. They're ratting on each other. But they've only been gone 15 minutes and 28 seconds. So calm down. And then we're jumping back to Earth, and Sulu and Kirk are still at that computer, and a lone security guard catches them. He asks for their belts and their bags and, come with me. McCoy and Spock are still worried, so they send like a signal from Enterprise that is beeping in the belt that the security guard is holding.
Spock and McCoy try to call Kirk and Sulu on their communicator, but the communicator's in the bag that Sulu just handed over. The guard gets distracted by the communicator, opens the communicator, and in doing so, activates an emergency SOS signal, which is what triggers Spock and McCoy to immediately beam out the communicator and whoever's holding it back up to the Enterprise. And now we've got a new problem. Now they've got two people from Earth on the Enterprise.
And as the security guard materializes on the transporter platform, he is in the position that they beamed him up. He's like crouched over and holding it all weird, like hunched over.
Yeah, I think because right before he ends up getting beamed up, there's a movement by Sulu or Kirk toward him, so he gets defensive and he points his gun at them. And you're right, that's the position he gets beamed up in. Again, proving that Captain John, when he was beamed aboard the Enterprise from his jet, should have been in a sitting position, and when he rematerialized, should have fallen on his butt.
So the security guard is still so scared of where he is, he doesn't move while McCoy just plucks his gun and the phaser out of his hand, and he's just staring, stuck there. And we have a commercial break. So coming back from that commercial break, Sulu and Kirk have already gathered all of the radio transmissions, but now they need to find the photographs that are in another part of the facility, in the photo lab.
By another part of the facility, we mean literally one door up on the left.
Very easy. So they slip in, but they can't find them just laying around willy-nilly. So they go into the dark room, which has a silent alarm and notifies 3 other security policemen that come running down to the photo lab.
Well, it's also the base commander is who's alerted, and I believe it's the same technician who found the original blip of the Enterprise on the radar. I could be wrong, but it's 2 people in the commander's room, one of them being the commander, and the two of them run down to the photo lab and they pick up another security guard on the way.
So while they're running, though, the Kirk and Sulu didn't know they triggered the alarm. Kirk tells Sulu to wrap up what he's doing, and he will go back into the other room just to make sure they didn't miss anything. But as he's closing the door, he meets up with the commander and those two security policemen that are after him. So Kirk is now fighting the three officers, trying to, keep them distracted, and Sulu is able to beam up back to the Enterprise with all of the evidence, and Kirk is captured and taken back to the commander's office. On the Enterprise, Spock comments to Sulu that it was a good idea you beamed up when you did. Scotty says the warp engines are back online, and McCoy wants to know what Spock is going to do about Kirk being left behind on Earth and how we're going to rescue him. Spock then says he has his own idea and has Captain John join him in the briefing room. Back on Earth, we're in the Colonel's office, and he is interrogating Kirk, trying to figure out who the heck he is. I mean, he's like, you better start talking. How did you get into all this top secret rooms, and, just how and why? And Kirk just replies, oh, I just popped out of thin air. Then the Colonel says, what's in your bag? And pulls out a phaser. And Kirk's like, be careful with that. And that seems to be the only thing that Kirk has shown emotion over. So the Colonel uses this as kind of like a motivation to get him to speak some more. But, I mean, Kirk keeps just saying, you won't believe me. Again, the Colonel is playing with the phaser. I mean, he even tosses it to another officer. Luckily, it didn't go off or hurt anyone. And he's like, I'm going to ask you again, person. Who are you? Where'd you come from? Or, I can just start listing the charges for you. So Kirk just goes, I am a little green man from Alpha Centauri, a beautiful place. You ought to see it. And the Colonel just gets even more angry. And he says, I'm just going to lock you up for 200 years. And this is when I thought that he broke that wall, because he just looks at us and goes, that sounds about right.
I was going to ask if this was the moment you thought he broke the fourth wall. He doesn't quite. He definitely is just speaking out loud to no one. But no, he's not breaking the fourth wall.
It was just so funny. And then we jump back up to the Enterprise, where Spock is asking Captain John, do you have the coordinates where the security office is? How do we get there? And he says, I sure do, but I won't tell you unless I get to go with you. I want to go down to Earth also. And I mean, after some scrutiny, they do decide that Spock, Captain James, and Sulu will go down. And they'll only take 2 phasers, one for Spock and one for Sulu. And then Captain John makes a comment to Spock, you don't trust me, do you? And then Spock replies, kind of, but only certain points.
Yeah, it also doesn't make sense to give Captain John a futuristic phaser that he has no training or knowledge in its operation.
I mean, all guns are the same, right?
No. The rest of the hosts of this episode do not agree with Jaci's opinion on firearms.
So anyways, they go to the transport room and get on the platform, but Spock has to literally move Captain John into position.
Yeah. It's also funny if you look, he shifts Captain John over so that he's standing on the transporter pad, but then you look just behind him at Sulu, and Sulu's got almost an entire foot off of the transporter pad, so it doesn't really make a difference.
Oh, I'm going to have to go back and look. That's funny. And, of course, that accidental beam up, that police officer is still there, and he's still crazy looking.
Yeah, it's a fun little shot as they beam away. There's a camera pan back over to the transporter control panel where we get the transporter chief. So it's a fun reveal to the audience that the guard is still there.
The transport master asks the
transporter chief.
Thank you, transporter chief asks if the policeman is hungry, and he says, yes, of course I am. How about some chicken soup? And then they wander over to a wall, and the chief pushes random buttons and then opens a flap and pulls out a bowl.
Yeah, this would be a food synthesizer or a food replicator.
That's insane.
It's going to become pretty common Star Trek technology in Star Trek on the timeline moving forward. I don't really know exactly when in the Star Trek history that it's added, because remember we had the previous episode with Charlie X where they refer to baking turkeys in the oven. So at some point early into the first year of the Enterprise's mission, food replicators and food synthesizers have to become technology that becomes available on the Enterprise.
Like it just appeared. But back on Earth, Captain John, Spock, and Sulu are walking to the Colonel's office so that they can save Kirk.
It's also fun to point out that there was this huge debacle or conversation, debate, argument between Spock and Captain John about getting Captain John's cooperation to show them where in the base Kirk would be held and where the interrogation room would be. It's literally the same hallway. They're hiding behind the same display case that we saw earlier for trophies. Literally, Kirk is being held in the interrogation room that is directly across the hall from the photo lab where he's captured.
Well, Sulu probably didn't know that. He only knew the dark room.
Yeah, they probably had no idea that the show didn't have enough money to build another hallway.
There's a guard standing in the hallway, and Captain John walks by that guard to distract him, which allows Sulu to jump on him and knock him out. And then Spock is able to go into the room, knocking on the door, having it open, and he nerve pinches that person, making him fall to the ground, which then enables Kirk to leap up and take out the Colonel. Captain John manages to steal a gun from one of the unconscious guards while everyone is distracted and holds them all at gunpoint, demanding that they let him stay on Earth. And then we have a commercial break. Coming back from that commercial, we're still in the office, but Spock has managed to slip into a back office and with its own separate exit, so he can be in the hallway where he's able to go back into the office and knock Captain John out with another nerve pinch. We're hopping back to the briefing room on the Enterprise this time. We now are up on the Enterprise in the briefing room, and we've brought Captain John with us. We have Spock, Scotty, and Kirk. Spock says their best chance of getting home would be to recreate what happened to get them in the current position they are in. They should create a slingshot effect by using the sun's gravity and create a whiplash effect, which would send them into their own time.
Right. By using the sun as a means to use this slingshot maneuver, it allows them to try to gain enough speed to trigger the time travel effect to get them back to their own time. This is literally Star Trek meets Back to the Future. Time travel can only happen if you're traveling fast enough. This is also going to provide a convenient way to get John and the security guard back onto Earth, because when they accelerate to these speeds, for a moment, time is going to travel backwards before it jumps forward. Stay with me. None of this makes sense. None of this is scientifically proven.
I'm very lost.
But this will allow them to gain enough speed, jump slightly back in time by about a day, transport Captain John and the security guard back to Earth in the exact right moment when they go missing, which will also somehow mean that they won't remember anything. And then magically, the Enterprise, still traveling at fantastically high speeds, will jump forward into their own time. But also keep in mind, as Scotty points out, the Enterprise is going to have to slow itself down. Otherwise, it's just going to shoot past its own time and they'll continue to travel forward into the future, apparently.
Back on the bridge, the Enterprise leaves Earth, starts to go around the sun to be able to do their slingshot maneuver where they gain their speed. As they're speeding up, Kirk tells John to go down to the transport room and get ready to go back to Earth. The Enterprise passes Earth. They transport John and the security guard back down to Earth to where they're supposed to be.
Yeah, specifically, they transport John to the jet in the moments where John first sees the Enterprise before the tractor beam was activated to lock onto the jet. And the security guard is beamed down to the hallway outside the computer room before he catches Kirk and Sulu stealing the computer tapes.
Yes, and both of them are quite confused at first while they're there.
It's probably pretty disorienting to them. Also pointing out, this shouldn't work. They're literally beaming someone into their own body.
Like a ghost.
Yeah, it's definitely problematic for Star Trek technology and how the transporter works. If you beam someone inside of another person, they shouldn't take over. This isn't Quantum Leap, but let's just pretend that in the exact microsecond that they activate the transporter and they transport the person down, the person that they're transporting into pops out of the timeline, and it's just so instantaneous. It's seamless to the viewer. Let's pretend that. And don't worry, we won't have to pretend about it another time.
Oh, good, because it's very hard for me to explain these things. And then the Enterprise continues on its way.
It's still gathering speed in its Back to the Future DeLorean maneuver.
And then finally, Sulu tells them that they have passed Pluto.
And more importantly, they have, according to their calculations, approached their correct time period. So Kirk basically throws the Enterprise into reverse. He starts slowing down.
That emergency brake thing?
Pretty much. It's a good way to describe it. They don't want to overshoot their time period. There's a whole dramatic scene where the Enterprise shakes around as it fights against the forces of decelerating from such a high speed, but ultimately the ship stays intact. They slow down to normal speeds. They're back in their time period.
Kirk is able to reach Starfleet Command and say that they are home, and then we hear his computer in her sultry voice say, "Record ship arrival, dear," and then Kirk out.
And roll credits. So, Jackie, what did you think about Season 1, Episode 19, Tomorrow is Yesterday? What are your final thoughts?
I really enjoyed it. I think they did a good job meshing. I have to add the music. So, meshing the music along with the bits of comedy and I would presume the crazy science fiction that I know nothing about, but is all the rage for you Trekkies.
I don't know that I'd go that far. Time travel episodes, if you break them down too much, they break apart. There's too much time paradox when it comes to it. We mentioned it briefly. The entire, well, if they take Captain John out of the history, then do they have any record of anything that he would have accomplished? Would Spock's computer technically say that he disappeared and died on this mission to go look at the Enterprise? Who knows? But all that aside, again, I really like this episode as well. Time travel's a great episode theme for Star Trek. They don't overdo it ever. They don't do time travel too much, which is nice. It doesn't get old. And I really enjoy this format for the original series, much like Shore Leave. The interjections of the comedic moments, the jokes, the little inside tongue-in-cheek references, the little breaks from the drama and the action, I think really adds to the pacing of the episode, and I really enjoy when the original series is able to do that effectively. Again, just like time travel, they don't do it too often, so it doesn't get too old or too predictable, but it's nice when they're able to pull it off like they did here. So we'll round out our summary of the episode here with our favorite quotes from the episode. see if we chose something different. Jaci, what is your favorite quote from the episode?
I really enjoyed when Captain John and Captain Kirk were stepping off of the turbo lift onto the bridge, and Captain John joked that he had never believed in little green men, and he happens to look up, and Spock replies, "Neither have I." And they just have this moment. This quote is just so very memorable, and whenever we think of aliens or UFOs, we automatically go to little green or big green human-like things with giant eyes.
And I thought you were going to pick the quote when Captain Kirk is being interrogated and he says he's a little green man from Alpha Centauri.
I'm not gonna lie, that one was up there.
That was going to be my first quote, and I second guessed you, so I chose a different one. But it is a good quote, so
And he said it's so cute.
we'll share it. But the quote I picked is at the very end of the episode as they're making their slingshot maneuver around the sun, and Captain John is on the bridge looking at everything. There's some dialogue that we left out of the summary where he's talking about how he wanted to always be an astronaut. He never thought he'd make it into space because he didn't make the cut for the astronaut program. It's pretty superficial to the plot of the episode. But my quote is in that moment, John says to Kirk, "I never thought I'd make it into space." And Kirk replies, "Take a good look around, Captain. You made it here ahead of all of them." Again, I think it's really cool that throughout the episode, Kirk has sympathy and empathy toward Captain John and his plight and circumstance, even up until the point where they're betrayed and Captain John pulls a gun on them and tries to use violence to get his way to stay on Earth. In the very next scene, he's joining them in the briefing room and he's part of the group again. Throughout the entire episode, Kirk treats him less like a handicap or a hindrance to the problem and more as an equal. Maybe even that might be why the show chose to put him in a command uniform instead of civilians' clothing, because they wanted to treat Captain John as, at least on some level, as their equal, at least to show him respect. So,
And he really did beat everybody because it's super, super, foreign time.
yeah, but then he goes back to Earth and he remembers none of it. So there you go. There's the bittersweet moment for our quotes. At this point, I do have some Tribble tidbits, which is our version of fun facts for the episode. And why do we call them Tribble tidbits, Jaci?
Because they're the best. Tribble, tribble, tribble.
Because Jaci doesn't know what tribbles are. They're both a blessing and a curse, which kind of are...
Like glitter.
Yes, like glitter. Or like some of our facts. So, originally airing in the United States on January 26, 1967. The story for this episode originated as a one-page pitch from a writer and a gentleman named Robert Justman, given directly to Gene Roddenberry as they were writing scripts and episodes for the first season. Roddenberry took that pitch and turned it into an episode, and even though the episode and the plot is pretty much on point to the original pitch, Roddenberry gave Justman no credit, and Justman received no royalties or any compensation for his pitch being used.
That's terrible.
That's the way Hollywood is. This episode is significant in that it accurately pinpoints, and it has to be an estimate, that the moon missions would put humans on the moon in the late 1960s. Again, we have the radio transmission that shows when they first arrive and they time travel back to Earth and they get the radio news report. I assume it's radio. I guess it could be a television signal that the Earth moon mission is launching. This all takes place and airs in 1967 before the moon landing. So they really don't know. And this episode was written prior to 1967. So they really don't have any way to know that this is in fact going to happen. Other science fiction television shows and movies, all written before 1969 with the moon landing, also took a stab and predicted and talked about when the moon landing would take place, because everyone had pretty much optimism that it was going to happen, but they all pinpointed it in the 70s or even early 80s. Star Trek in this episode is the first time that a fictitious science fiction piece of work accurately predicted the moon landing in the late 60s. However, this aired exactly one day before the tragic Apollo 1 fire.
Oh no.
So, little juxtaposition. Optimism to the space program, predating by one day, really the first major setback, I would argue.
Bad juju.
The black star that was described as the source of the Enterprise's initial time travel back to the 1960s wasn't referred to as a black hole, even though that's the phenomenon that they were trying to describe, because the term black hole wasn't being widely used by physicists and other scientists to describe the phenomenon in space. In 1967, black holes were observed, they were known about, but they weren't officially named black holes until relatively shortly after this episode aired. This episode was also going to serve as part 2, or a sequel, to the previous episode, The Naked Time. That's the episode where they all got drunk on the water. We had Sulu running around shirtless with the rapier.
Oh, that was a good one.
Jaci's eyes are lighting up in recognition. But you remember at the very end of that episode, they ended up doing their own form of time travel with accelerating really fast and not accelerating.
Yeah.
They were able to go back in time by 3 days, if I remember correctly. So originally, The Naked Time was going to end where they go back in time, but they go all the way back to 1960 or the 1960s, and then this episode would start. So there wasn't going to be a black hole. They, of course, changed it. They broke it up into 2 episodes.
That was a good idea, though.
The addition of the security guard that gets beamed up and all of his scenes were added because originally the script called for filming the Enterprise's encounter with the black hole and its time travel. We don't see any of that on the screen. They decided that ultimately that would be too expensive and they could easily just explain it with that first captain's log that we get. But that meant that the episode ran short of time. So to fill it and pad it out, they added this character and they added all of his scenes, and so that filled the episode back out. I think it was a good addition. The food replicator that's added in the transporter room, speaking of our friend the security guard, was added instead of having someone bring him chicken soup or have them go down to the mess hall to get chicken soup. Besides the fact that he was supposed to stay in the transporter room and not see more than he needed to, it was cheaper to add a hole in the wall of the set and just push the chicken soup through and show this food replicator technology than it was to hire an extra to serve as a food delivery to bring him the chicken soup on scene. So, money saving. Because again, they had to add his part at the last minute. And my last triple tidbit, the jet flown by Captain John by pure coincidence is a Lockheed F-104 starfighter. So, literally a starfighter hunting down the Enterprise. But those are your triple tidbits. And finally for the episode, we will share our episode ranking. This is where we pretend the episode is a member of our crew of our fictitious starship. We have a starship every season. And we assign a rank to the episode that indicates not only how entertaining we found the episode when we watched it, but how important of a crew member we find it to be to serve on our starship. A higher rank episode means not only that we were more entertained by the episode, but we find the episode would be a more important member of our crew. A lower rank episode, of course, means that we weren't as entertained by the episode, and we find them to be a more disposable member of our crew, such as a red shirt. Our episode ranking goes from the bottom: ensign, lieutenant junior grade, and lieutenant, of which we can have an unlimited number of crew members. And then at the top, we narrow it down. We can have 7 lieutenant commanders, 5 commanders, 1 captain, and 1 admiral. As a reference point, as we get to Jaci's ranking, last week's episode, Arena, Jaci ranked it a lieutenant, which would be a roughly 4 or 5 out of 10, middle of the road and slightly below middle of the road. Jaci, for this episode on the USS Galactic Glitterbee, what rank will you be assigning it?
Well, I need to demote someone, but as a reminder, though, we can demote and promote in order to make room for the episode that we've watched. And so I will be demoting the Menagerie Part 1. I would like to add it to the Lieutenant Commander, so it'll be all full there. And then I want to put this episode in the commander spot.
So that'll reunite Jaci's Part 1 and Part 2 of the Menagerie in Lieutenant Commander, completely filling up that section and adding Commander rank status to today's episode. Tomorrow is yesterday. Why the change? Why the rank?
Because finally I found an episode where I kind of understood what was actually happening besides all the space speeding thing. But it was fun and I just liked it.
All right. And I'm going to say we're going to retroactively add a rule for our ranking system. We originally had the menageries by chance both paired up equally in our different rankings, and they got split up at some point to make room. So the new rule is going to be they get promoted and demoted together. So they're going to take up the space of 2 ranks no matter what. And if none of this makes sense to you, we will have a visual representation of our ranking posted on Wednesday on our Patreon at patreon.com/treks and tangents for anyone to view and to see what our current rankings are, as well as where the rankings stood after each episode. And for my starship, the USS Cosmic Shark, I'm also going to need to shuffle some things around to make room. So we're going to take the episode What Are Little Girls Made Of from the commander level, and we're going to drop that all the way down to lieutenant, and that's going to open up a spot in the commander level, and I am also going to rank this episode as a commander. What Are Little Girls Made Of, I believe at the time was an episode I found entertaining, but looking how it stacks up against the rest of my rankings, it's just not going to be as entertaining so far as the rest of the episodes we've seen to warrant a spot in the lieutenant commander position. So we're going to drop it down to the junior grades and keep it middle of the road, but we'll keep it as a lieutenant in kind of that unlimited capacity. This week's episode, Tomorrow is Yesterday, very similar reasons as I've mentioned before. Time travel episode, fantastic. An episode that leans into comedic jokes and comedy relief moments, perfect. What keeps this out of the top tier perfect episodes for me? A lot of sloppiness with the time travel theory and technology itself. If time travel is just needed to slingshot around a large planetary object like a black hole or a sun, it's something that we would see more often in Star Trek, which we don't. So it's got some problematic technology as well with how they return Captain John and the security guard by beaming them back into their own bodies. I don't really know what the solution would be, but certainly transporting yourself into yourself can't be something that we find as a solution to problems in Star Trek. So fantastic episode. Couple minor bumps that are going to keep it out of a perfect rating for me.
I think this is where Ghost got the idea how to go back into your own body.
Yeah. But that will be our rankings. Feel free to leave a comment wherever you listen to the episode, on whatever platform you listen to let us know what ranking you would give this week's episode and your thoughts to the episode. We'll be back next week to check through another episode, but before we go, this is where we'll give our Turbolift tease for the week, or elevator pitch to next week's episode's plot. I will give Jaci the title of the next episode, and Jaci, with no other information, will give a brief pitch to that plot. Jaci, Next week's episode is entitled Court Martial.
The Enterprise is exploring this space and galaxy, but they get a call and somebody in somebody's past, so I'm going to choose Sulu. Someone in his past is in trouble and obviously needs their help.
And tune in next week to see how accurate Jaci's prediction is. If you want more show information, you can find and directly support our podcast on Patreon at patreon.com/treksandtangents. As mentioned, every Wednesday we post an updated ranking where we visually show where the episodes are currently ranked. It includes all of the changes, the demotions, the promotions. I don't think we've had a promotion quite yet, so.
Maybe soon.
And that's available for anyone to view. For crew members who support the Patreon, we post once a month, the fourth Friday, an episode of Animated Detours where we dive into the animated series of Star Trek. We also post all of the test episodes that we've done that led up to the production of this podcast. You can listen to this podcast format as we dive into some episodes of Fringe, Stargate SG-1, and hopefully we'll have some more of that coming soon. So hopefully we see you all over there. You can also follow us on x.com at Treks_tangents. We're also on Instagram and Blue Sky at Treks and Tangents. Jaci, where can people find you and what are you up to?
You can find me over on Instagram as Jiboom, Jibboom. I share tons of life. Like currently, I'm waiting for hip replacements. I also play the tuba and flute, as well as showing off crazy fashion and lots of bright makeup and, like I mentioned earlier, glitter. Plus, I also have a shop at Whatnot, and you can look me up at Glitterbow Boutique. I will see you there.
And you can watch me stream a variety of video games over at twitch.tv/PiratePoundTown. On YouTube, I post video game and other random content on my main channel, also Pirate Pound Town. My second channel on YouTube contains coin collecting and other hobby content at Pirate Treasure Hunting. I post socially on Blue Sky at Pirate Pound Town, and I can also be found on Instagram under Pineapple Cannibal, because who doesn't want to be a pineapple cannibal? Links to all social media mentioned can be found in the episode description. Thank you everyone for tuning in to this week's episode. We hope you had fun like we did, and we will see you all next week.
Dribble.
End transmission.